The first time my son told me the house belonged to him, he was standing in my kitchen. It was a Tuesday morning in March 14th, 2023, to be precise. I remember because the coffee machine had just finished its slow, tired gurgling, and the little digital clock on the microwave blinked 7:42 a.m. Small details stay with you when something important breaks. I poured my coffee into the same chipped blue mug my wife Linda had bought at a roadside diner 20 years ago. The handle was cracked, but it still held heat better than the expensive ones my daughter-in-law insisted on buying. The kitchen smelled faintly of toasted sourdough and lemon cleaning spray. My son Daniel stood by the island counter scrolling through his phone, dressed in one of those slim charcoal suits that make men look important even when they're not. His wife, Melissa, was loading organic yogurt into a canvas work bag that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. I sat down at the kitchen table. Oak, solid, heavy. I'd bought that table in 1998 for $1,200 when Daniel was still in high school. He used to do his math homework right there. Funny how furniture remembers things people forget. You left the lights on in the hallway again, Melissa said without looking at me. Her voice had that tight politeness that always sounded like a complaint wearing a polite mask. I was reading, I replied. At 2 in the morning? I'm 71, I said. Sleep, and I aren't on speaking terms anymore. Daniel snorted slightly, still staring at his phone. Melissa sighed and zipped her bag. You know the electric bill was $486 last month, she said. I took a slow sip of coffee. The bill had been $210 when Linda was alive. Back then the house was quiet. Back then it was still mine, at least in the emotional sense. Legally, things were more complicated, but I'll get to that. You could just turn things off, Melissa continued. It's not that hard. Daniel finally looked up. Mel, it's fine. No, it's not fine, she said. Expenses are piling up. Expenses. That word always makes me smile a little, because I know exactly what those expenses are. $182,000 for the down payment when Daniel lost his startup in 2018. $94,500 for the essential renovation Melissa insisted the house needed. New kitchen cabinets, marble counters, smart lighting system that turns on when you clap your hands like a trained dog, and another $41,000 for furniture that looked good on Instagram. All paid through my accounts. All transferred quietly. I remember the exact dates. Banks send very precise confirmations. Daniel leaned against the counter. Dad, he said carefully, we should probably talk about space. That word again. Space. I buttered my toast slowly. Outside, the garbage truck rumbled down Maplewood Drive, stopping at each house with that metallic hydraulic groan. Our house, or what Daniel called our house, sat on a corner lot with 2 maple trees and a stone walkway Linda had planted lavender beside. The real estate agent had valued it last year. $1.2 million. Funny number. 30 years earlier, Linda and I bought it for $240,000. Back when Daniel still thought $5 allowance was a fortune. What about space? I asked. Melissa sat across from me. She folded her hands the way people do when they think they're about to be very reasonable. Well, she said, Daniel and I were thinking it might be healthier if you had your own place. I chewed my toast slowly. The butter tasted faintly salted. Is this about the hallway light again? Daniel rubbed the bridge of his nose. No, Dad. Come on. It's just the house is getting crowded, Melissa said. Crowded. The house has 4 bedrooms. I use one, and half of the basement for my old woodworking tools. I see, I said. Daniel stepped forward. Look, you've done a lot for us. We appreciate it. That word, appreciate, is often used when someone is about to take something away from you. But this is our home now, he continued. I looked up. Our home. Melissa nodded. Daniel said it casually, carelessly. It's my house now, Dad. Silence filled the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed softly. Somewhere upstairs, their robot vacuum bumped into a wall with a dull plastic thud. I watched my son, the boy who once cried because his goldfish died. The man standing in front of me had my eyes, but none of my memory. You're right, I said quietly. Daniel relaxed immediately. Melissa smiled, the tight smile of someone who believes a problem has been solved. Neither of them noticed a small detail that mattered, the one thing they had never bothered to check. the deed. Because, while Daniel believed the house was his, the legal title, the controlling signature inside the Caldwell Family Property Trust, filed on October 3rd, 2019, still belonged to me. And that little piece of paper was worth about $1.2 million. I finished my coffee and stood up. "Don't worry," I told him calmly. "We'll talk about the house." And as I walked slowly toward the hallway, I noticed something new. 2 of my old boxes were already sitting near the basement stairs, packed, labeled, ready to move. That's when I realized something important. My son thought the conversation was already over. But for me, it was only beginning. If you believe older voices still matter, support this channel with a like and a subscription. The boxes didn't appear all at once. That would have been too honest. Instead, they showed up the way mold does in an old house. Quietly, gradually, until one day you realize the wall has turned black. The first box appeared on March 16th. Brown cardboard, a roll of packing tape sitting beside it on the basement steps like an invitation. Melissa stood in the hallway holding a stack of my books. My books, the same engineering manuals and mystery novels that had lived on the living room shelf for 15 years. "Oh," she said lightly when she saw me watching. "I'm just organizing." Organizing, that word, like space, has a way of meaning something else entirely. "What are you organizing?" I asked. "These are things you don't really use anymore," she said, sliding the complete guide to electrical systems into the box. I had used that book for 38 years at the power plant. I didn't argue. There's a point in a man's life where arguing becomes a form of begging. And I had never begged anyone for anything, not even when Linda died. Instead, I carried my coffee downstairs and sat at my workbench. The basement still smelled faintly of cedar and motor oil. My old tools hung on the pegboard exactly where I'd left them years ago. Wrenches, clamps, a rusting handsaw. Melissa hated the smell down there, said it made the house feel industrial. I liked it. It reminded me of a time when things were built with hands instead of apps. Upstairs, I could hear cabinets opening, boxes sliding, footsteps moving with purpose. The sound of someone rearranging a life that wasn't theirs to rearrange. By March 22nd, 3 more boxes had appeared. One held my winter coats. Another held Linda's old photo albums. The third contained a small wooden clock I'd built in 2004, back when Daniel was still proud to show his friends something his father made. I ran my thumb along the clock's smooth walnut edge. The second hand ticked quietly. Time is funny like that. It keeps moving even when family stop. That evening we had dinner together. Melissa liked family dinners. She said they were important for maintaining healthy relationships. The meal was grilled salmon, quinoa, and roasted asparagus. Total cost, roughly $34, judging by the receipt I saw earlier on the counter. I still remember when Daniel's favorite dinner cost $6. Spaghetti and meatballs. "Dad," Melissa said halfway through the meal, "have you thought about what we discussed?" "I think about many things," I replied. Daniel didn't look up from his plate. He had developed that habit recently, staring down when uncomfortable topics appeared. It's a technique politicians use. "You could get a really nice condo," Melissa continued. "Something manageable." Manageable, that word again. Daniel finally spoke. "We've actually been looking at options." "Have you?" I said. "Yeah." He reached for his phone and slid it across the table. A photo filled the screen. A small beige apartment building somewhere near the highway. 2 floors. Parking lot. No trees. $2, $300 a month, he said. Pretty reasonable. I chewed slowly. $2,300. Interesting number. Because the mortgage payment on this house, the one Daniel believed he owned, was $3,870 per month. Guess who had been quietly paying $2,500 of that every month since 2019? Banks keep records. Looks practical, I said. Melissa smiled. I'm glad you're being open-minded. Daniel cleared his throat. There's something else. Of course there was. We've been talking to a real estate agent. I waited. She says the market is incredible right now, he continued. Houses on Maplewood are selling for $1.3 million. Melissa added quickly, maybe even $1.4 million if we stage it right. Stage it. Funny word. People stage houses the way actors stage plays. The audience sees beauty. They don't see the ropes behind the curtain. And what would you do with $1.4 million? I asked. Daniel shrugged. Upgrade. Melissa's eyes brightened. There's a place in Brookhaven. Modern architecture. Huge windows. She turned her phone toward me. Glass walls. Steel staircase. Everything white. Cold. Expensive. Price tag at the bottom. $1,950,000. Daniel laughed lightly. Of course, we'd sell this place first. Of course. I nodded slowly. The salmon was slightly overcooked. Linda never overcooked fish. Melissa leaned forward. The only complication, she said carefully, is timing. Timing? Well, it would be easier if the house felt less crowded during showings. Daniel shifted in his chair. We just mean that buyers like clean spaces. Minimal, Melissa added. Minimal? I thought about the boxes in the basement, the label tape, the quiet little eviction happening one cardboard square at a time. Dad, Daniel said gently, you understand, right? I wiped my mouth with a napkin. Yes, I said. I understand perfectly. And I did. Because while they were planning open houses, staging furniture, and imagining how to spend $1.40 million, there was a small technical detail they had overlooked. A detail buried inside a 17-page property trust agreement filed at the county clerk's office. A detail that required one signature before this house could ever be sold. Mine. And the real estate agent, whoever she was, would discover that soon enough. Because banks, lawyers, and county registrars are very particular about one thing: ownership. Daniel thought the house was his. Melissa believed the paperwork had already been handled years ago. But paperwork has a way of remembering things people conveniently forget. I finished dinner and stood up. Good meal, I said. Melissa smiled. Thank you. As I walked toward the basement, Daniel called after me. Dad. I turned. We'll figure something out soon. I nodded. Oh, I'm sure we will. Downstairs, I opened the drawer of my old desk. Inside sat a thick folder. Gray. Stamped with a date. October 3rd, 2019. I ran my hand across the cover and smiled for the first time in weeks. Because Daniel believed we were discussing moving plans. But in reality, we were approaching something much more interesting. A legal conversation. I waited 9 days before calling my lawyer. Not because I needed time to think, but because patience has a way of revealing people's real intentions. By March 31st, the house looked different. 3 more boxes had appeared in the basement. Melissa had replaced Linda's old curtains with pale gray linen ones that looked like they belonged in a hotel lobby. The living room smelled faintly of eucalyptus spray and fresh paint samples. Staging. They had started staging the house. Daniel had even moved my old recliner out of the living room. I found it downstairs beside the furnace. The leather armrest still carried the faint indentation where Linda used to rest her elbow while reading in the evenings. Funny how memories get relocated just like furniture. That morning, I made my usual coffee. The same chipped blue mug. The same quiet kitchen at 7:05 a.m. Daniel had already left for work. Melissa was upstairs on a Zoom call discussing marketing strategy or yoga retreats or something equally expensive. I sat at the kitchen table and dialed a number I hadn't used in almost 3 years. The phone rang twice. Carter and Bellman Law Offices. A younger voice. Good morning. I'd like to speak with Robert Carter. 1 moment, please. Soft piano music filled the line. 30 seconds later, a familiar voice answered. Well, I'll be damned, Robert Carter said, if it isn't Harold Caldwell. I smiled despite myself. Robert and I had known each other since 1989, when he was a young attorney handling municipal contracts and I was still working maintenance at the city power station. I thought you retired, I said. I did, he replied. Twice. My wife keeps sending me back to the office, so I stopped reorganizing the garage. That's a good reason. He chuckled. What can I do for you, Harold? I glanced toward the staircase. Melissa's voice drifted faintly from upstairs. Our Q2 engagement metrics. Modern life sounded exhausting. I need to review a document, I said. Which one? The Caldwell Family Property Trust. Silence followed. Robert remembered immediately. October 3rd, 2019, he said slowly. Yes. The Maplewood property. That's the one. Robert cleared his throat. Is there a problem? I leaned back in my chair. That depends, I said, on how good your memory still is. His voice turned professional. Come by the office at 10. I'll bring the coffee, I said. Bring donuts, he replied. Legal advice is expensive. Carter and Bellman occupied the same brick building they had used for 30 years. Second floor, faded brass sign. A waiting room that still smelled faintly of paper and furniture polish. Robert Carter looked exactly as I remembered him. White hair, thick glasses. Suspenders that suggested he had given up pretending fashion mattered. He waved me into his office. Sit, he said. The office walls were lined with shelves of legal volumes nobody read anymore. I placed the gray folder on his desk. He opened it slowly. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second. Then he leaned back and let out a long breath. Well, he said, that's interesting. Is it? Robert removed his glasses and cleaned them with a handkerchief. You're telling me your son thinks he owns the Maplewood house? Yes, and he's talking about selling it. Apparently for around $1.4 million. Robert laughed, not loudly, but long enough to be satisfying. Harold, he said finally, your son can talk about selling the house all he wants. He tapped the document with his finger. But according to this agreement, he turned the folder toward me. He doesn't actually own it. I knew that, of course. But it's always pleasant hearing a lawyer say it out loud. Robert flipped to page 9. Here, he said, paragraph 4.2, controlling authority. The Maplewood property was transferred into the Caldwell Family Property Trust in 2019, he explained. Yes, you remain the sole controlling trustee. Correct. That means the property cannot be sold, refinanced, transferred, or leased. He paused for emphasis. Without your written authorization. I sipped the coffee I'd brought. So Daniel can't sell the house? No, not even if he hires an agent. No. What if he signs something? Robert smiled. It wouldn't be legally valid. He leaned forward. Harold, let me put it simply. He tapped the desk twice. Your son lives in the house. Yes, but he does not legally control the house. I nodded. And the deed? Robert opened another page. Still held by the trust, he said. Estimated market value $1.20 to $1.30 million. And the beneficiary clause? I asked. That's the interesting part. He adjusted his glasses again. Daniel is listed as a future beneficiary. Future. Important word. But only after your death, Robert continued. And only if the trustee does not liquidate the asset beforehand. I let the silence sit for a moment. Meaning, I said slowly, if I sell the house tomorrow? Robert nodded. The proceeds remain entirely under your control. And Daniel receives nothing? Correct. Robert leaned back again. Out of curiosity, he said, why did you structure it this way? I thought about that for a moment. About the $182,000 down payment. The $94,500 renovation. The quiet assumption that generosity meant ownership. I suppose, I said, I believed in insurance. Robert chuckled. Smart insurance. He closed the folder. So what's the plan? I looked out the window at the courthouse across the street. Cars moving. People walking. Normal life continuing. Well, I said, apparently my son wants to sell my house. Robert raised an eyebrow. And I stood up slowly. I think, I said calmly, I'll let him try. Robert smiled. Harold? Yes. This is going to be entertaining. I picked up the folder. Yes, I said. I believe it will be. The real estate sign appeared on April 7th. Bright white. Tall metal post. A smiling woman's face printed beside the words. Sold fast with Karen Doyle Maplewood Realty. I noticed it at 9:18 while watering the lavender bushes Linda planted along the walkway 20 years ago. Melissa stepped outside with her phone pressed to her ear. Yes, Karen, she said brightly. Saturday works perfectly. Saturday, 3 days away. She finally noticed me standing by the mailbox. Oh, she said, covering the phone's microphone. Dad, we forgot to mention. Forgot. Another interesting word. We're having showing this weekend. I looked at the sign again. How exciting. Melissa nodded enthusiastically. The market is insane right now. She returned to the call. Yes, we decluttered a lot already. The basement too. Decluttered. That explained the extra boxes. By Friday evening, the house barely looked like the one Linda and I had lived in. The family photos were gone. The bookshelf, half empty. Melissa had replaced our old coffee table with a rented glass one that looked like it belonged in a dental office. Even the smell had changed. Vanilla candles, fresh linen spray, the careful artificial scent of someone wealthy lives here. Daniel walked into the kitchen around 6:30 p.m. carrying a bottle of wine. Big day tomorrow, he said. Is it? Karen already scheduled 5 couples to see the house. 5. Interesting. At what price? I asked. Daniel opened the bottle. We listed at $1,395,000. He said the number casually, like a man announcing the weather. Melissa appeared behind him. If the bidding starts, we could easily hit $1.45 million, she added. Her eyes sparkled. I wondered briefly what she planned to spend the extra $50,000 on. Probably furniture. People always buy furniture before they learn about consequences. Daniel poured 3 glasses of wine. To new beginnings, he said. I raised my glass. To clarity, I replied. Neither of them noticed the difference. Saturday morning arrived bright and cool. By 10:02 a.m., the first car pulled into the driveway. A silver Tesla, then a black BMW, then a white SUV with a family inside. 2 children arguing in the back seat. Karen Doyle arrived shortly after. Tall, perfect hair, the kind of smile people use when they're trying to sell you something expensive. Daniel, she called cheerfully. They hugged like old friends. Then she noticed me. And this must be my dad, Daniel said quickly. Karen extended a hand. Karen Doyle at Maplewood Realty. Her handshake was firm, professional. You have a beautiful home, she said. I smiled. Yes, I said. I know. Melissa ushered the first couple through the front door. This way, watch the step. Karen began her tour speech. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, fully renovated kitchen, smart home system. The words floated through the house like background music. I sat quietly at the kitchen table. Couples walked through in polite silence. Some nodded approvingly. Others whispered about square footage. One man tapped the marble countertop and asked if it was imported. Melissa practically glowed. Then something interesting happened. A tall man in a navy blazer stepped into the kitchen and stopped when he saw me sitting there. Oh, he said politely. Sorry. Not at all, I replied. He glanced around the room. Are you the owner? Daniel answered before I could. Yes, he said quickly. This is my father. The man nodded. Beautiful property, he said. Daniel smiled proudly. We've put a lot into it. That part was technically true, just not in the way he meant. The man turned back to me. And you live here too? For now, I said. Melissa shot me a quick look. The kind people give when they wish someone would stop talking. Karen clapped her hands lightly. Let's continue the tour, she said. They moved into the living room. I stayed where I was. Around 11:15 a.m., something even more interesting happened. Karen walked into the kitchen alone, holding a clipboard. She smiled professionally. Mr. Caldwell, right? Yes. Quick question. She lowered her voice slightly. For the paperwork. Of course. She glanced at the form in her hand. Daniel mentioned the property transfer happened in 2019. That's correct. Great. She smiled again. Then we'll just need confirmation of the title holder before we proceed with offers. I took a slow sip of coffee. Title holder. Such a precise phrase. Yes, I said. Karen tapped the page. Standard procedure. The person listed on the deed signs the closing authorization. Of course. She looked relieved. So Daniel can provide that document Monday? I set my mug down carefully. Actually, I said calmly. No. Karen blinked. No. I folded my hands on the table. The person listed on the deed. I paused just long enough for the sound of footsteps to approach from the hallway. Daniel and Melissa entered the kitchen. Would be me. The room went quiet. Karen's smile froze. Daniel frowned. What? I leaned back in the chair. The deed is held by the Caldwell Family Property Trust, I said, and I'm the controlling trustee. Karen slowly lowered her clipboard. Daniel stared at me. That's not. Oh, Karen said softly. She flipped through her paperwork again. Then, Her eyes moved between us. You would be the one who authorizes the sale. I nodded. Yes. Melissa's face had gone pale. Daniel looked confused. The kind of confusion people experience when reality interrupts their plans. Karen cleared her throat. Well, she said professionally, that's an important detail. Daniel finally spoke. Dad, he said, what is she talking about? I stood up slowly. The kitchen suddenly felt very quiet, very clear. Don't worry, I told him. We'll talk about the house. Karen looked at Daniel. Daniel looked at me. And for the first time since this whole situation began, my son realized something was very wrong. The last couple left the house around 12:37 p.m. Their SUV backed slowly out of the driveway, while Melissa stood on the porch smiling and waving like a flight attendant seeing passengers off. Karen Doyle lingered beside the mailbox, flipping through her clipboard with the careful concentration of someone who had just discovered a legal landmine. Daniel stood in the doorway, behind me. He hadn't said much since the kitchen conversation. That silence was unusual. Daniel had always been a talker when he believed he was right. Melissa walked back inside first. Well, she said brightly, a little too brightly. That went great. Karen followed a few seconds later. Several people seemed very interested, she said carefully. Her eyes kept drifting toward me. Real estate agents develop a particular skill over time, the ability to detect problems before they explode. Daniel folded his arms. Karen, he said, can you give us a minute? She nodded quickly. Of course. The front door closed, and the house became quiet again. Daniel turned toward me. What the hell was that? Melissa stepped forward. Dad, why would you say something like that in front of the agent? I pulled out a chair and sat down at the kitchen table. I didn't say anything untrue. Daniel rubbed his forehead. The D thing. It's not a thing, I said calmly. It's a document. Melissa laughed nervously. Okay, but obviously Daniel owns the house now. That was just paperwork from years ago. Was it? Yes, she said quickly. We transferred everything when we refinanced. I nodded. Did you? Daniel walked to the counter and grabbed his phone. I'll just pull up the mortgage documents. He scrolled, tapped, scrolled again. Melissa crossed her arms. This is ridiculous, she muttered. You're making the showing awkward for no reason. I watched Daniel's face slowly change as he read whatever was on the screen. First confusion, then irritation, then something closer to concern. Dad, he said slowly, why does the county registry still list the property under Caldwell Family Property Trust? I shrugged slightly. Because that's who owns it. Melissa's voice sharpened. That's impossible. Daniel looked up. It says the trust holds a title. Yes. And you're listed as controlling trustee. That's correct. Silence filled the kitchen again. Melissa turned toward Daniel. That's just estate planning, she said quickly. Right? Daniel didn't answer. He kept staring at the phone. I decided to help. The trust was established on October 3rd, 2019, I said. Daniel looked up sharply. That was when we bought the house. No, I corrected gently. That was when I protected the house. Melissa laughed again, but it sounded thinner this time. You're joking. No. Daniel placed the phone on the table. You're saying this house isn't mine? I'm saying, I replied, that legally it belongs to the trust, and you control the trust. Yes. Melissa shook her head. That makes no sense. It makes perfect sense, I said, especially when someone contributes $182,000 for the down payment. Daniel blinked. And $94,500 for renovations. Melissa stopped moving. And another $41,000 for furniture. The room became very still. Daniel leaned back in his chair. You kept track of that? Banks do that automatically. Melissa spoke slowly. But Daniel pays the mortgage. Part of it, I said. Daniel looked confused again. What do you mean part? I reached into my jacket and placed a folded piece of paper on the table. Bank statements, 3 pages, dates highlighted. Daniel read the first line. Monthly transfer, $2,500. Caldwell Trust account. Then the second. Then the third. He looked up. You've been paying a mortgage? Since January 2019. Melissa stared at the papers. That's not possible. It's very possible. Daniel ran his hand through his hair. So what does this mean? I leaned back in the chair. It means the house cannot be sold without my signature. Melissa's voice rose. Why would you do that? Insurance. Insurance against what? I looked directly at Daniel. Against exactly this conversation. The front door opened slightly. Karen Doyle stepped inside again, holding her phone. Sorry to interrupt, she said cautiously, but I just received a call from the title company. Daniel turned toward her. What now? Karen hesitated. Well, they ran a preliminary ownership check. She looked at me. Mr. Caldwell is listed as the legal authority on the property. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Melissa whispered, Oh my God. Karen shifted uncomfortably. So, before we proceed with offers, she paused. We'll need written authorization from the trustee. She didn't need to say who that was. Everyone in the kitchen already knew. Daniel turned slowly toward me. You did this on purpose. I shrugged. I prepared. Melissa's voice trembled. You embarrassed us today. I stood up calmly. No, I said. You embarrassed yourselves. Daniel pushed his chair back. So what now? I picked up the bank statements and folded them neatly. Now I said we wait. For what? For the offers. Daniel stared at me. You're not serious. Oh, I'm very serious. Melissa looked between us. You're not planning to block the sale, are you? I walked toward the hallway. My old boxes still sat near the basement stairs. Packed. Ready. I paused beside them and turned back. No, I said quietly. I'm not planning to block anything. Daniel exhaled in relief, but I hadn't finished speaking. I'm planning, I added calmly, to control it. By Monday morning, the house felt different. Not because the furniture had moved again, although Melissa had already rearranged the living room twice since the showing. No, the difference was quieter, heavier, like the moment after a storm when the air still smells like rain, but the sky hasn't decided what to do next. Daniel barely spoke during breakfast. Melissa scrolled through her phone with the tight concentration of someone trying very hard to pretend everything was normal. At 9:14 a.m., Daniel's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. Karen, he muttered. Melissa leaned closer immediately. Well, he answered. Hey, Karen. Pause. Already? Another pause. Then he straightened in his chair. That's fast. Melissa grabbed his arm. What is it? Daniel covered the phone for a moment. We got an offer. Her eyes lit up instantly. How much? Daniel listened again. Then he said slowly, $1 for 20,000. Melissa gasped. Oh my God. Daniel smiled for the first time since Saturday. That's $25,000 over asking. He listened again. Yes, that sounds good. Pause. Okay, send the paperwork. He ended the call and leaned back in his chair. Melissa jumped up and hugged him. I told you, she said. The market is insane right now. Daniel laughed. We might even get a bidding war. I continued stirring my coffee. Melissa turned to me. Well, Dad, she said, looks like everything worked out. I nodded slowly. Yes, I said. It seems things are moving quickly. Daniel grabbed his laptop and opened it on the kitchen table. Karen's emailing the offer contract now. Melissa was already pacing. We need to start looking at Brookhaven again. That glass house? Yes. She grinned. With this offer, we can finally make it happen. Daniel's inbox chimed. Got it. He clicked the file open. The room filled with the soft tapping of his keyboard. Purchase agreement, inspection clause, escrow, deposit $50,000. Melissa leaned over his shoulder. Scroll. I'm reading. Just get to the signing part. Daniel finally stopped scrolling. Here. He pointed to the bottom of the document. Seller's signature. Melissa smiled. Easy. Daniel reached for a pen. Then he stopped. His smile faded. What? He stared at the screen. Seller authorization required from title holder or legal trustee. Melissa blinked. So sign it. Daniel shook his head slowly. It lists the trust again. Melissa's voice sharpened. Then just put your name. He didn't move. Karen said the title company verifies signatures. So, he looked across the table at me. I might not be allowed to sign this. Melissa turned toward me slowly. You're not actually going to interfere, are you? I placed my spoon on the table. Interfere? Yes. You already proved your point. Daniel nodded quickly. Yeah, Dad. The trust thing. Fine. We get it. Melissa folded her arms. But the sale is happening. I watched them for a moment. Two people standing inside a house they believed was already sold. You're very confident, I said. Daniel exhaled. It's just paperwork. Is it? Melissa stepped closer. You're not going to sabotage our future over some legal technicality. I stood up slowly. A technicality? I repeated. Daniel rubbed his temples. What do you want? The question hung in the air. I walked to the window. Outside. The for sale sign swayed gently in the wind. Karen Doyle's smiling face stared back at the house. What do I want? I said quietly. Daniel nodded. Yes. Melissa added quickly. If this is about money, we can figure something out. That made me smile. Money, I said. Interesting assumption. Daniel's patience snapped. Then what is it about? I turned back toward them. It's about ownership. Melissa scoffed. Oh, please. No, I said calmly. Please listen. I walked back to the table and placed both hands on the wood. Daniel, I said, when you were 8 years old, you broke a neighbor's window with a baseball. He frowned. What does that have to do with anything? You remember what I made you do? I paid for it. Yes, I said, with your allowance for 3 months. Melissa rolled her eyes. This is ridiculous. Daniel shook his head. You're comparing a window to a house? No, I said. I'm comparing responsibility. I picked up the printed offer contract. $1,420,000. A very impressive number. You want to sell the house? I said. Yes. You want the money? Yes. You want the future? Obviously. I placed the paper back on the table. And yet, I said quietly, you never asked the one person who actually owns it. Silence filled the kitchen again. Melissa looked furious. Daniel looked tired. Finally, he said, Okay. What? Fine. He pushed the contract toward me. You sign it. Melissa stared at him. Daniel, if that's what he wants, then let him sign. I picked up the pen. Both of them watched carefully. The moment stretched. The tip of the pen hovered over the page. Then I placed the pen down again. I'm not signing this, I said. Melissa exploded. You said you wouldn't block the sale. I'm not blocking it. Then what are you doing? I looked at them both. Waiting. For what? Daniel asked. For a better offer. Melissa's face turned red. That's insane. Is it? I tapped the contract lightly. If someone is willing to pay $1.42 million today. I looked toward the window. I suspect someone else might pay more tomorrow. Daniel stared at me in disbelief. You're negotiating? I smiled calmly. No, I said. I'm selling my house. Bidding wars are strange things. They start quietly. A phone call, an email, a number slightly larger than the one before. And suddenly, everyone begins behaving like gamblers who smell blood in the water. By Wednesday morning, Karen Doyle had called 4 times. The first call came at 8:12 a.m. Mr. Caldwell, she said carefully, we have another offer. I was sitting on the back porch drinking coffee when the phone rang. The lavender bushes had just started blooming, and the air smelled the way Linda used to love in early spring. How much? I asked. $1,455,000. I nodded, though she couldn't see it. That's quick. Yes, Karen admitted. The market is very competitive right now. Daniel and Melissa were inside the kitchen when I walked back in. They both looked up. Well? Daniel asked. Another offer, I said. Melissa leaned forward. How much? $1,455,000. Her mouth fell open. Daniel whistled softly. That's insane. Karen called again that afternoon. Then again the next day. The numbers climbed away. Numbers do when people convince themselves they must win. $1,470,000. Then $1,488,000. By Friday morning, the top offer reached $1,512,000. Even Karen sounded slightly stunned when she said it. Mr. Caldwell, she said, I believe we've reached the ceiling of the market. I sat at the kitchen table with the paperwork spread neatly in front of me. Across the room, Daniel paced like a man waiting for medical test results. Melissa watched me with a mixture of anger and anticipation. So, Daniel finally said. So I replied, we accept. Closing day was scheduled for May 2nd, 2023. Title office, third floor of a glass building downtown. The room smelled faintly of printer toner and expensive carpet cleaner. Karen Doyle sat on one side of the table. The buyers, a young tech couple from Seattle, sat on the other. Daniel and Melissa sat beside me. A title officer slid the documents across the table. "Mr. Caldwell," she said politely, "as trustee of the Caldwell Family Property Trust, you'll sign here." She pointed to a yellow tab. Daniel stared at the page. "So that's really it," he said quietly. "Yes," the officer replied. "You are the legal authority for the sale." I signed slowly. One line, then another. My signature appeared 12 times across the stack of documents. Each one transferred another piece of reality into ink. When it was finished, the title officer smiled. "Congratulations." The final sale price sat neatly printed at the top of the page. $1,512,000. Melissa whispered under her breath. "Unbelievable." Daniel leaned back in his chair. "So what happens now?" The title officer answered calmly. "The funds will be wired to the trust account by the end of the day." Daniel nodded. Then he turned toward me. "We'll need to move quickly if we want that Brookhaven house." I looked at him. He frowned. "Yeah." Melissa added carefully, "We'll start looking at properties this weekend." The title officer paused slightly. Karen Doyle looked down at her paperwork. I folded the documents neatly. "Daniel," I said. "Yes." "The trust received $1.512 million today, right? And the trust belongs to me." His expression changed slowly. "What are you saying?" I stood up. "I'm saying the house has been sold." Melissa blinked. "Yes. And the proceeds remain under the control of the trustee." Daniel's voice grew tight. "You're the trustee?" "That's correct." Silence fell over the conference room. Karen pretended to reorganize her files. The title officer suddenly found her keyboard very interesting. Melissa spoke first. "So when we transfer the money, we don't..." Daniel stared at me. "What?" "The trust holds the funds. And I've already arranged the next purchase." Melissa frowned. "What purchase?" I slid a small folder across the table. Inside were 2 printed photographs. A modest lakeside house. 2 bedrooms. Wide porch. Tall pine trees reflecting in the water. Purchase price, $412,000. Daniel looked confused. "You bought another house?" "Yes." "For who?" "For me." Melissa's face turned pale. "You're joking." "No." Daniel pushed the photos back toward me. "Wait a second. You sold the house?" "Yes." "And you're keeping the money?" "I'm investing it. In yourself." "That seems fair." Melissa's voice rose sharply. "What about us?" I looked at her calmly. "You're adults." Daniel's hands tightened on the table. "We lived there." "Yes." "We paid for things." "Yes." "You can't just walk away with everything." I leaned slightly closer. "Daniel?" "Yes." "You told me something in the kitchen 3 weeks ago." He didn't answer. "You said," I continued quietly, "it's my house now." The room went very still. I picked up the photographs. "Well," I said, "now it isn't anyone's." I walked toward the door. Behind me, Daniel's voice came out hoarse. "Dad." I stopped. "What?" "Where are we supposed to go?" I thought about that for a moment. Then I opened the door. "Somewhere manageable," I said. And I left them sitting in the conference room. In future, they had been so certain belonged to them.